Welcome back to Comic Cappers. Today we're diving into the absolute universe where the Man of Steel is anything but the hero you remember. Instead of the bright beacon of hope, we're introduced to a weary, sun-starved exile. He's a fugitive, a living weapon hiding in the shadows, burdened by a sentient suit that's constantly whispering for him to abandon this world. As he walks through the scorched earth, you can feel the weight of his isolation. This isn't just a man, he's a survivor on the run, and his journey into the dark begins right here. We're pulling back the curtain on the absolute universe's past, and it's not the bright, optimistic Krypton you might expect. This is a world defined by industrial rot and looming destruction, setting the stage for why Kal-El is so disillusioned today. As the caption tells us, years ago, 9 million light-years from Earth, the planet Krypton was ruled by its cities. It's a haunting, oppressive landscape of smoke and steel, a civilization so consumed by its own architecture and progress that it's literally burning from the inside out. We're diving into the history of Krypton, a world defined by its rigid, soaring architecture. These are the sprawling centers of science like Kandor, where lab-grown gardens and lava-powered plants thrive under a red sun, all anchored by massive, crystalline supercapacitors. Inside those gleaming towers, the Science League clerics held total control. They were obsessed with progress, draining the planet's own life force to fuel their insatiable hunger for advancement, regardless of the ecological cost. These elites were the absolute authorities, the venerated minds of their society. But as Kal-El looks back on his heritage, he makes a bitter distinction. His parents weren't part of that ruling class, they were on the outside looking in. We pull back to see the harsh, alien landscape of Krypton. It's a world of jagged stone and red-hued plains where the environment itself feels like it's failing. A lone voice breaks the silence, noting we shift to a close-up of a worker, likely a farmer, sifting through the dry, lifeless soil. He laments the incompetence of the Sky Department, citing massive, destructive gemstorms near Zan. He senses a deeper, systemic rot, concluding. We get a look at the systemic rot on Krypton. A local worker vents his frustration to Lazarus, noting that while the clerics charge for rain, the Redlands are left bone dry while the elite cities of Kandor and Argo hoard the resources. Lazarus, working beneath a machine, pushes back on the ridiculous costs. She points out that the 3,000 Krim monthly bill is highway robbery, an obscene price for a service she could practically build herself if the law allowed. But the danger of being labeled a deviant is too high. The worker reminds Lara that she's the only mechanic skilled enough to keep his vintage harvester running, and he needs her to get it fired up. After the repair, the worker offers Lara a basket of crabberries as payment, noting they're Jor-El's favorite. He brings up a somber point. Jor-El is going under again today. Lara's expression shifts. She notes that Jor-El has undergone this process 3,475 times before, yet for the first time, she's filled with a gut-wrenching, inexplicable dread about what's coming. Technological cloud seeders finally deliver a downpour over the arid landscape. It's a rare, expensive commodity, and the workers are eager to get out of the storm. Jor-El stands in the rain, confused and concerned, watching Lara remain out in the open. He reminds her of the exorbitant cost they paid for this artificial weather. Lara ignores the practical cost, standing with her arms wide, embracing the rare sensation of the rain. The narration shifts to her past, revealing that she was once a brilliant student with a bright future ahead of her. That promise was shattered early. Her intellectual curiosity and critique of Krypton's isolationist policies earned her the label of unruly, effectively blacklisting her from the Science Academy. It's a heartbreaking reveal. A 9-year-old girl whose only crime was dreaming of the stars, her ambition crushed by a rigid, fearful society. We get a glimpse into the rigid hierarchy of Krypton, where the Science League rules from the top, clearly separated from the rest of society. Down at the bottom of that social ladder, we see the Labor Guild, the backbone of the planet, grinding away in the shadows of the elite. This system was so oppressive that your status was a uniform. The crest of the labor wasn't just a badge, it was a mark of shame, treated as a sign of being poor and unskilled. But for some, the perspective was entirely different. Kal-El's parents wore that same crest with genuine pride. They saw themselves as the children of the sun, people who built their world with their own 2 hands rather than living off the theories of the elite. They were the people of steel, a legacy that clearly defines the man their son would eventually become. Deep within the Sunstone mines, the situation turns critical as an automated system blares a dire warning. Instability alert, evacuate the mine immediately. Jor-El and his crew are pushed to the brink, their mission suddenly shifting from extraction to survival as the environment itself begins to betray them. Despite the urgent alarm, the skepticism of the elite is chilling. An official surveys the depths, dismissing the danger with a cold, analytical eye. He claims there are no structural red flags like fractures or dimpling, questioning if the miners' reports of splintering are just nerves, setting the stage for a tragic conflict between labor safety and corporate indifference. Inside the deep, glowing crimson tunnels of the Kryptonian mine, the overseers are dismissive of the danger. They argue the workers are just losing their nerve, claiming the scans show absolutely nothing wrong with the site. Jor-El, however, isn't buying the corporate line. He places a hand on the unstable sunstone, listening intently to the planet itself, sensing that Krypton is trying to communicate a warning that the others are choosing to ignore. An aggressive superior confronts Jor-El back at the surface, demanding to know why production has stalled. Jor-El stands his ground, citing his authority from geological engineering to justify shutting down the shaft. When pushed to provide data on the instability, Jor-El suggests running deep drill probes, but his superior is already losing his patience, threatening to turn this professional disagreement into a major problem for the young engineer. The tension hits an all-time high as the corporate overseer flaunts his radiation scars as a badge of office, mocking Jor-El's concern for the mine's structural integrity. Jor-El refuses to back down, drawing a hard line in the sand, literally by declaring the shaft closed for safety, despite the aggressive pushback from the overseer's goons. Jor-El shifts his focus to the workers, urging them to flee while the overseer insults his humble origins in the red wastes. The overseer doubles down on his threats, promising to exile Jor-El to the tundra for his insubordination. As the environment begins to protest with a deep, ominous rumble, we transition to a flashback reflection. Jor-El's academic brilliance was once his ticket out of this life, long before the planet began to tear itself apart. Jor-El was destined for greatness, poised to secure a high-ranking position within the ruling class, but as the ground literally tears apart beneath them, he realizes the catastrophic truth they've been ignoring, and the only order left to give is to run. We flash back to his graduation, where he stood before the Science League, not to accept their honors, but to condemn their environmental recklessness. The tension is palpable as the world around him begins to crumble. He warned them that their pillaging of Krypton's natural resources would lead to global catastrophe, but his words fell on deaf ears. The Earth fractures, proving his point in the most violent way possible. Instead of listening, the elite laughed him out of the academy, stripping him of his status and his future. Now, with the planet dying, that same desperate command echoes, "Run." It's a haunting final beat. The planet is literally hemorrhaging energy, a silent testament that Jor-El was right all along. We witness the final, violent collapse of Krypton's infrastructure. The planet is literally tearing itself apart, and the industrial structures that define their society are being pulverized in a blinding wash of radioactive green energy. Amidst the chaos, the desperation is palpable. Jor-El is seen reaching out to save someone, his face twisted in a futile struggle against the destruction of the towering cities and the redlands he once called home. Everything is falling. The legendary purple farms and the great glass mountains of Zard are crumbling into dust, leaving nothing but screams and the inevitable end of a civilization that ignored the warnings. The tragedy is absolute. Whether you were a scientist or a laborer, the El family or a stranger, the planet's fate was sealed. Krypton was doomed, and this was the devastating, final price of their collective hubris. We shift from the dying world of Krypton to the harsh reality of Earth, specifically a struggling favela in Brazil. The atmosphere is heavy, with the workers hoping for reprieve from the environment, though they clearly know better. We see the faces of the miners, men and women who look like they've seen the worst of humanity. There's a grim, fatalistic bond between them as they discuss the presence of God in their suffering, setting up the tragedy that unfolded just days ago. The scene cuts to the source of their misery, the entrance to the Lazarus Creek mine. Lazarus Corp security, clad in their signature gear, looms over the workers, forcing them into a death trap of asbestos exposure for the sake of profit. We pull back to the favela outside the mine, where families watch the sky as a sickening snow begins to fall, a lethal blizzard of carcinogens that coats everything in a layer of poison. When the workers attempt to escape this death trap, they're met with the cold, militarized reality of their situation. Lazarus Corp keeps them under contract through sheer force, and their armed guards ensure no one leaves the site. Inside the crushing darkness of the mine, Kal-El observes the human cost of corporate greed. Lazarus Corp dangles a measly $300 in hazard pay, a pittance compared to the $200 million in diamonds pulled from this earth last year. Watching these men risk their lives for their families, Kal-El finds his own mission reflected in theirs, right up until he discovers something that makes him stop in his tracks. The miners are in total shock. They descend into the depths only to find their work already finished. The ore is mined, crushed, and the dangerous asbestos dust has completely vanished. Disbelief grips the group. They know no human could have pulled off such a feat, and they're terrified of the implications, quickly deciding to keep this impossible miracle a secret. Joe steps up, his tone hardening. He commands his fellow workers to stay silent and just focus on getting the diamonds to the surface. They push the cart out, driven by the desperate need to finally claim their pay. Lazarus Corp's peacemakers watch in confusion as the miners emerge. The soldiers compare this strange event to mysterious, unexplained incidents in Botswana and Daravi. As they clear the mine, the workers whisper among themselves, wondering if this is the work of the legendary Omega Men, while fearing the consequences if the truth about their savior ever got out. We flash back to the previous night, catching the weary miners in the favela as they huddle together against the cold. Survival here isn't just about the backbreaking labor in the Lazarus Corp mines, it's about the social isolation that can be just as lethal as the work itself. A local worker named Joe approaches the hooded Kal-El, trying to bridge the gap with a series of questions, wondering if the stranger even speaks his language. Joe is clearly just trying to be neighborly, acknowledging that in a place like this, everyone keeps their heads down and their secrets locked away. He shares the local gossip, mentioning that the elders think the stranger is just some wild, feral boy from the Amazon who doesn't know how to speak. Joe introduces himself, finally pressing the stranger to reveal who he is, but the visual shift to the skeletal view hints at the dangerous, hidden nature of our protagonist. Kal-El finally breaks his silence, his eyes piercing through the hood as he delivers a cold, detached response that makes it clear he wants nothing to do with these people. Life in the mines is brutal, but there's a desperate warmth to the community. One of the workers invites our weary traveler to join their celebration, promising food, drink, and a sense of belonging. The traveler, hidden beneath a dark hood and struggling through the biting cold, seems distant, barely registering the invitation as he reflects on the broader, harsher reality he's witnessed. He isn't talking about this specific mine anymore. He's seen the pattern, industries built entirely on the backs of the suffering, wherever he goes. His companion presses him, asking how he can be so certain of what's true when everything feels so broken. Kal-El looks up, his eyes glowing with a faint, intense light. He offers a simple, heavy philosophy. Truth is found only when you have something worth fighting for. It's a haunting admission. When the worker asks what happens if you have nothing, the traveler simply turns away, thanking him before vanishing into the snow. The worker is left standing alone in the dark, confused and calling out into the void as the mysterious figure disappears, his work, whatever it might be, calling him away. Lazarus Corp forces have zero patience for the workers at this mine. One of the armored peacemakers brutally strikes a laborer, demanding to know who's been causing trouble and disrupting their diamond operations. As the peacemaker prepares to execute the defenseless worker, a subordinate interrupts with a status report, confirming that every single laborer is accounted for except for one missing person. That missing person is Kal-El, and he's not hiding anymore. Inside his sentient suit, Saul registers the incoming peacemakers and forces Kal-El into action, cutting off his solar recharge and initiating a combat sequence that Kal-El knows will blow his cover for good. Kal-El is exhausted, his internal monologue revealing the cyclical nature of his life as an outlaw. He spent years drifting from one exploited industrial site to another, from jungles to deserts, constantly fighting the same corporate machine. The tension spikes as Lazarus Corp's forces arrive in force. They aren't interested in conversation, they're here to clear the area, showing a brutal disregard for the families and children caught in the crossfire. The scene is grim. Kal-El reflects on his own vulnerability. He's let himself become sun-starved and weak, making this confrontation far more dangerous than it should be. The peacemakers surround the perimeter, guns drawn, demanding he surrender or face lethal force. Caught in the crosshairs, Kal-El's mind drifts back to his lost Kryptonian identity. The harsh reality of his situation snaps him back to the present as he realizes he's no longer alone in the dark. Caught off guard by the sudden resistance, a peacemaker operative is sent reeling as Kal-El strikes with explosive force. We see the devastating impact of that blow, as the Lazarus Corp vehicle is sent flying through the air, shattered by the sheer power of the attack. Chaos erupts as the remaining soldiers open fire. Despite being sun-starved and weakened, Kal-El realizes that his long-held desire to walk away from this fight is finally overridden by his need to protect the oppressed. Kal-El has spent years playing the fugitive, constantly moving to stay ahead of the corporate machine. But as the Lazarus Corp peacemakers surround him and open fire, he finally reaches a breaking point. The weariness of his exile is replaced by a cold, hard resolve, and he decides that he is finished running. He stands his ground amidst the gunfire, ready to fight back for the people he's been trying to protect. Kal-El is in the thick of it, tearing through Lazarus Corp's forces with ease. He notes that their gear isn't from around here, clearly alien tech being weaponized for profit. Saul, ever the pragmatist, warns him about the lethal consequences of his strikes, but Kal-El isn't having it. He's locked in on one mission, getting those miners out alive. Saul doesn't mince words, shifting the suit to maximum caliber to handle the escalation. The AI gives Kal-El a bleak reality check, reminding him that this world is defined by constant conflict and destruction, and that true safety is an illusion. The soldiers regroup, their tech adapting to Kal-El's sheer power as they prepare to hit him with everything they've got. Saul is pulling no punches, reminding Kal-El that his solar reserves are dangerously low. Even as the environment turns into a literal inferno, Kal-El remains laser-focused on the innocent lives trapped in the crossfire. Kal-El stands amidst the chaos, shielding a child. He's clearly grappling with the weight of his own intervention, desperate to justify his actions as he tries to mitigate the disaster he's inadvertently helped trigger. This is a haunting, repetitive breakdown of his psyche. Kal-El is spiraling, convinced that every ounce of destruction unfolding around him is his own fault. Finally, the toll becomes too much. While he urges the workers to flee with the diamonds, his own body gives out, racked by a massive discharge of energy. Saul's warning is immediate and urgent. He's pushed himself to the absolute brink. Chaos erupts as Kal-El, crackling with raw, unstable energy, lashes out at the Reaper drones swarming the mine. High above the fray, the Lazarus Corp Phenomena field team monitors the situation, receiving direct orders from command to bring the target in alive. These agents are seasoned, and they immediately recognize this anomaly from previous incidents in Botswana and Daravi, noting the strange digital interference surrounding him. They zero in on the true secret of his power, the suit itself. One agent correctly identifies it as a shifting, living armor that Kal-El seems to be communicating with. As the team prepares to deploy, the strain on Kal-El reaches a breaking point. Saul warns him that he's losing control, but it's too late. His solar-starved body erupts in a blinding, destructive release of energy. Kal-El finally snaps. He unleashes a blinding, explosive burst of heat vision directly at the Lazarus Corp operatives, catching them completely off guard. One agent is vaporized in the sheer intensity of the blast, screaming as he realizes exactly what kind of power he's dealing with. As the destruction ripples out, Saul, the sentient, shifting armor, speaks directly to Kal-El in his mind. It's a cold, clinical reminder of its primary directive, to safeguard the last remnant of the House of El at any cost, even if it means sacrificing everything else. The feedback loop is agonizing. The strain of the discharge and the suit's interference hits Kal-El with visceral, bone-rattling intensity, leaving him doubled over in the rubble. Desperate to stop the feedback and the collateral damage, Kal-El screams for Saul to force a shutdown. He's reaching his breaking point, and the suit is clearly becoming a cage he can't control. Saul is frantic, urging Kal-El to disengage before he's overwhelmed by the Lazarus Corp forces. The chaos of the battlefield fades into a somber reflection on Kal-El's origins. Kal-El looks up, accepting the grim reality that not every life can be rescued. The arrival of the military air and ground units underscores the futility of his mission. The Lades Creek mine is suddenly crawling with military hardware. Massive Lazarus Corp tanks tear through the debris, signaling the arrival of a heavy-duty tactical response. Lazarus Corp operatives swarm the area with aggressive precision. A commander barks orders to his field team, showing just how little they care for the safety of the workers on site. Kal-El, physically drained and exhausted, finally concedes to the cold logic of his sentient suit. He's surrounded by tanks and choppers, realizing that his attempt to intervene has only brought more misery to the people he wanted to save. It's a crushing realization for him. Kal-El admits his mistake, his eyes heavy with the weight of his failing strength and the futility of his mission. Before he can make his move to leave, the suit's mechanisms lock tight with a final, ominous metallic sound. He's trapped in his own armor, and the confrontation with Lazarus Corp is now unavoidable. The scene shifts to the Nevada desert, revealing a remote, high-security Lazarus Corp facility hidden away from the prying eyes of the world. Inside the R&D department, a shadowy figure stands before a glowing doorway, intrigued by a new discovery they've managed to secure. This mystery scientist is hooked up to a massive array of monitors, obsessively reviewing footage of Kal-El in action. They're clearly unhinged, treating the captured footage of the wandering exile like a sick game, while the tortured, mutated beings in the containment tanks around them scream for the sweet release of death. We pull away from the desert and shift focus to central Kansas. It's a lonely, isolated homestead sitting in the middle of nowhere. Up close, the farm is a wreck. The barn is rotting, falling in on itself and completely abandoned. It's a far cry from the hopeful icon we usually associate with this name. Focusing on the mailbox, we see the name Kent still painted on the side. It's rusted, covered in cobwebs, and clearly hasn't seen a letter in years. Finally, the truth about this place is laid bare. A sign stands prominently in the yard. This is now the property of Lazarus Corp. The corporation hasn't just been exploiting mines, they've been erasing history. We pivot back in time to the desolate redlands of Krypton. It's a haunting, alien landscape, showing us the world before the catastrophe, a place where the environment was already suffering under the weight of the Science League's reckless industrial expansion. Inside a cramped workspace, Lara looks up from her machinery, clearly struck by a sudden, terrifying realization. Her quiet exclamation suggests that whatever she and Jor-El have uncovered, it's far worse than they ever dared to fear. Lara catches up to her husband, her voice cutting through the heavy, alien atmosphere of the Redlands as she calls out to him. She immediately notices the horrific radiation burns marring his body. Her medical instincts kick in, but Jor-El is clearly in a state of shock, barely registering her frantic questions about the mines or the hospitals. Jor-El pulls himself together just enough to demand total secrecy. He knows the implications of what they've discovered are too dangerous to share until he has absolute proof. He turns his gaze to the horizon, his voice heavy with the grim realization that their world is effectively dead already. Lara is left to grapple with the terrifying weight of his prophecy. Panic finally breaks through Jor-El's stoic facade as he fixates on their son. Lara quickly reassures him, grounding him back in the moment, though the shadow of their impending reality looms large. We pivot away from the main narrative for a standalone spotlight. Here, we see Darby Allin in a dynamic, high-energy ring entrance, skateboard in hand and ready for action, under the banner of an AEW crossover special. We get a sudden, jarring shift in narrative as we dive into the origin of Darby Allin. At just 5 years old, he had a brush with death that left him permanently marked. The tragedy struck when a car wreck claimed his uncle, brutally teaching him how quickly a normal life can be ripped away. This trauma cracked his world open. He was left half dead, teetering on the edge, but it ignited a persistent, gnawing hunger within him to fight back against the void. He retreated from society, choosing to exist on the fringes. He started living rough, drifting through the shadows of the city. That isolation drove him to seek out conflict. It didn't matter who the opponent was, he was essentially daring death to come for him, finding a twisted sense of validation in the sheer act of surviving each brawl. Only those visceral moments of victory gave him any semblance of peace. He became addicted to the fight, convinced that survival was the only thing that actually mattered. Everything changes when a mentor enters the picture. Sting, the icon and vigilante, steps in to pull Darby Allin from the darkness of his own self-destructive fringes, offering him a path that leads away from the gutter and into a new kind of purpose. This purpose isn't just about survival anymore. Whether he's launching himself across the wrestling ring or staring down the sheer, unforgiving face of a mountain, Darby is proving he's more than just half dead. He's alive and he's daring the world to keep up. We're taking a quick breather from the absolute Superman saga for this promotional crossover featuring the stars of AEW. It's a high-energy splash page showcasing a roster of fighters ready for action, reminding us that whether it's in the ring or on the pages of DC, the hunger to fight and prove one's survival remains a constant, driving force. We're taking another quick detour from the main story here, as this page highlights an upcoming release in the Teen Titans graphic novel series. It's a promotional spotlight for Corey's latest adventure, showcasing the creative team and providing a look at the other available titles in this collection. It's a clean break before we head into the final stretch of our absolute Superman coverage.